I'm got interested in this stuff when I was about probably 6 or 8 years old or so. And I started shooting still photographs with little rubber creatures that I would buy at toy stores, and just was always interested in doing it. You know, I saw a movie in the theater and I'd come home and sort of copy it. And that's what I would do. And it was just like a lot of fun doing it. And eventually I got a movie camera. And this is when I was much older. I was about 10 when I did a lot of this stuff. And shooting with a little 8mm movie camera. You know, I saw War of the Worlds and the original, and I saw Beast of 20,000 Fathoms, a Ray Harryhausen film. And just those were the films that first inspired me when I was like 6 years old or so, something like that. And then I saw Seventh Voyage of Sinbad when I was older, the Harryhausen film, and that just took care of me, and it's like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing in the world.
The invisible barrier between good and evil.
We made this film starting in 1965, and I was about 18, and the writer was 17, and the actors were like 16 to 20, and it was 16mm and just done locally in the Pasadena area around Los Angeles as a summer project, just for fun. And it ended up taking 2 years for us to actually finish it, and then I sold it to a guy named Jack Harris, who had made The Blob and Dinosaurs and films like that, and he added some more footage and released it, and it finally got released in 1970. Yeah, and it was it's pretty funny that it had a life after after the sort of amateur version on it, and you can see it if you remember knows Criterion. You can buy it on Criterion. They have my original version and the released Harris version, which is a combination of the two. Criterion has it. Yeah, you can put it in your library right between Grapes of Wrath and Citizen Kane. It just fits right in there. So.
À un moment donné, on voit le Taurus, ce que vous appelez le Taurus, et ça ressemble à King Kong.
Taurus, yeah. A model that had been made by a friend of mine a few years before was about this tall and it was a stop motion figure. And he had it, and we had no money to make this film. So he was really... you know, Dave was great. He helped me with it, and we put his character Taurus in the movie as one of the stop-motion creatures. It's all full of effects, and we did the movie really to showcase the effects that I love to do and Dave loved to do. And I went into it loving stop-motion and miniatures and matte paintings and all that, and I came out 2 years later having incredible admiration for directors and writers because that's really, really hard stuff. Getting the tone of a film right and everything. So, and I never did it again. It was one thing you can do when you make your own film is you can have whatever you want, within incredible restrictions. So, and I've seen the way directors what they have to deal with studio people and all, and I just didn't ever really want to be involved with that. So I just love doing effects, and that's why I've kept it up. I haven't done any directing or anything. For the most part, just looking for work, and there wasn't any. And at the same time, though, I had a little group of friends, and we were making our own little home movies. And a good year I would make like $700, and 1 year I made $3,000, which was amazing. But mostly it was like zero. And but a guy named Doug Trumbull, or John Dykstra, who had worked for Doug. John was at the University of Berkeley developing something for the architectural department, with a robotic camera shooting a little miniature of Marin County, which I happen to live in at the moment, but didn't back then. And they were going to put some buildings in there, and they had just the road, and they got the idea if they can build it all in miniature, they can then do sort of a drive-by, as a model, and then show it to the planning commission, show it to everybody how wonderful it's going to look when they build the new buildings or whatever like that. That technology that John put together for that was the forerunner of motion control photography for Star Wars, which really started about 3 or 4 years later. So he'd already kind of figured out a lot of the stuff to do, and then took it to the next level when he got the job to do Star Wars. And he did a terrific job on that, and that's what I got involved with. And I didn't, I'd known about this new technology that was going on. Because I'd seen 2001, and I met John once before on it. But I was with the old school special effects group in Los Angeles that we called the King Kong School. and a guy that I knew, an older guy, had actually worked with Willis O'Brien, who did King Kong. We kind of got to know Ray Harryhausen when he was in town. And that's, you know, it seemed like the stuff that we were doing was old-fashioned, and the stuff that had been done in 2001, where you build cameras and tracking, it's very precision and it looks amazingly real. I just had to learn that. So when I heard the Star Wars film was happening, I had known John, and he got the job, and I reintroduced myself to him and ended up working on it. So I learned all this new technology, but brought with it all the old school stuff that I knew from the old days of Hollywood, and how to light something to look amazing, and how to design a shot to look really, you know, as good as it can possibly look with like no money or no time. So I think Star Wars was always a combination of those two different schools of skills. You know, the hardest thing was really, it was the whole job. I mean, if one thing didn't work, nothing was going to work. It was all based on the camera gear being able to work and repeat the moves, and the models to look like they were big and not like really 15 inches long like they really were. And then the blue screen, we had to be able to get rid of the blue and put stars behind it. It would have been a complete failure. Not just a little, you know, not just some bad shots. The whole thing wouldn't have worked. And once we figured out how to do it, and the system was in, and then it was a matter of like, you know, then we knew we could do it. We got most of that work done on that show in the last 3 months, which is pretty amazing. They've been working on everything. We probably worked on it for 15 months or so to build all the gear. But once we got going, you know, it really flew, and we really were up to speed. That happened on almost every movie I've ever worked on. There's this process where you get ready and you're working and you say, this is going to be different. We're going to pace this so we don't get exhausted. But you always kind of are trying to make it better, and it's at the end when you have the big crunch and you put in the long hours and everything. And I think the work is better for it, actually. George always has had a pretty clear idea what he wants, and we had a storyboard drawn so he could communicate it to us what he wanted. He went through and he photographed off television a lot of World War II movies and a lot of documentaries on aerial flying, and a lot of, you know, the movie The Dam Busters was one that he really shot, and he would take these in 16 millimeter, shoot this, and then re-edit them, and those would be the template that he would then cut into the movie with his live action. So, you know, like meanwhile, back at the trench, and there'd be a shot from the Dam Busters movie where you were flying over really close to the ocean, where they're trying to drop a bomb into the water to blow up a dam, and we knew that was going to be replaced by a shot of the trench, but he could use it for pacing, and he could use it for sort of telling the angles that he wanted, the shot design he wanted for us. So we would think in terms of not just a drawing, but of time-wise or something going by. And then storyboards would be done that would show, here's, you know, what it looks like with the trench, and he did that for all the effect sequences in the film. And he's a very nice guy, and wouldn't lose his temper, and knew that he was pushing everything beyond what had been done before, and was just great. So, you know, and it was just so wonderful that the film came out and was so successful. From my point of view, it was the hardest film I ever worked on. And because if you compare it to Star Wars would mostly had spaceships flying against black backgrounds, and black is always good for matting, compositing, because it hides things. And they're mostly spaceships. You know, you got the Death Star here, and you got a few other things, but it's mainly spaceships flying. And you look at Empire, and you've got, you know, the walkers, you've got speeders flying around the walkers, you still have your spaceships, but they're giant, bigger spaceships, and a lot of smaller ones, and a lot of more dogfighting in different ways, and this Cloud City thing, and this asteroid field, which was visually very hard to figure out how to even see anything. And we had about the same amount of time. And we moved to Northern California from Los Angeles up to San Francisco, and we wanted to hire as many local people as we could. And so we did, and we needed to train them. And we only had 2 cameras when we started, so we were building a couple of more cameras, 2 or 3. So it was really hard. And the first prints that were made at the end of it were 70 millimeter prints that they used to make for the big theaters. And I think about 17 of those prints have got 30 temporary shots in them that were not finished. And they aren't horrible, but they're matte lines around things. Things are just not quite right. But we had to get those prints out in the theater. And then we did go ahead and finish them. And the studio always said, oh, don't worry, we'll pull, it was only a week later we finished. We'll pull all those other prints back and we'll replace them with the good ones, and I don't know if they ever did or not. So, and it was part of that, of having to rush at the end of almost all these shows, that I think sort of motivated George to want to do the special editions, because a lot of the shots were just not quite done in time. And in the mid-90s, there was a chance to go in there and kind of fix them up. And that's probably why he did it. And originally, we did it with a man in a suit, actually with my friend Phil Tippett, inside of a big man-sized suit he had made, and we had a couple of people like helping the arms bigger and everything, and we shot a test of it, and it looked horrible. And we didn't finish the suit, we just wanted to try it and see if we could get by with doing it. So it would be like a model. The creature's supposed to be like probably 20 feet tall. But we could build it scale down, and because they couldn't possibly do it, full size or anything like that. But I tell you, people know how the human body moves and everything. We grow up looking at people from the time where we first can even tell what we're looking at. And you could see right away there's a guy inside of a suit. And it just, we just couldn't do it. I thought we should keep going, but George said, no, forget it. So Phil came up with it, doing it like a Muppet. And it's a small puppet like this, and his hand is in it, working the mouth, and we have different rods coming off with 3 or 4 puppeteers doing it. And the trick that made it work is we shot it all in crazy ways. Some shots we did backwards. It's not stop motion, not go motion. We did it all for real. Shot slow motion, though, high speed. But we did some with it going backwards just because we all know what Muppets look like. We all know what our hand looks like with a sock on it trying to be a character. But if you do the performance backwards, the muscles are all working wrong. So when you see this creature, there's just, you don't recognize there's a hand in there anymore. It's like it's got its own life, which is the point. So we did some scenes, slow motion, fast motion, just to break it all up so it looked like it was an actual creature. And people really like that sequence. I'm not sure why, but there's something about it that's just really, I guess, really cute. And that's why you actually don't see the entire creature either, because we couldn't really show the legs and have it walk very well. So it's all done in close shots, which is fine. And it took a long time to shoot that, I tell you. I think we went over 70 takes with one shot. It wasn't stop motion, but it was Phil's hand was in it. Right. So he'd sit there like any of the Muppet operators with his arm up like this for like 2.5 hours. And, it's tough physically for him to do that. But anyway, yeah, he knew what he wanted. He knew how to get it. And then someone else would have a rod operating the left arm, and someone else had a rod on the right arm, and there would be little wires inside each finger, so you could get the finger to clamp like this, and you could get the wrist to move. And so he was working the body and the neck and the head, and everything else was being operated by rods. And I didn't want to use any blue screen in that either. I just wanted to be able to pan the camera around, so we just kept it dark. And we had all the rods going down in the shadows. And I made the areas behind where these black rods would have been black, like the rods were painted black. So you just couldn't see the stuff that was making that move, all those arms move and everything. So a lot of tricks, magic tricks. So that sequence was 103 shots in about 3 minutes, and George just said to me and Joe Johnson, do whatever you want. So we did some sort of storyboards, and he said, no. And he redid it and came in with an idea, or not storyboards, he came with some different ideas, a lot more plot things. And I couldn't figure out how we were going to do the sequence. We could build a big model for the forest. We had forests nearby, and the rest of the movie was shot in forests. But we didn't have any way to really not show a road, you know, and there were all these front views and rear views, and if you have a motorcycle, it's got to be on a road or something. I looked at using a rocket suit. There was a guy who had made one in Los Angeles, and it was $10,000 a day, and I thought for a day we could use this thing and actually fly through the redwoods, but George thought it was way too dangerous. And if he got hurt, you know, the lawsuit, no matter what waiver he might have signed, probably would have been a serious thing. So I came up with the idea of doing it with a Steadicam and shooting it, not like stop motion, but continuous slow shooting with the camera shooting one frame for every footstep that Garrett Brown, who invented it, who was actually doing the walking through the forest, that he took. So it sped up each step. Essentially, he was going 24 steps in 1 second. So it looks like you're going at like 90 or 100 miles an hour. We had 3 effects supervisors on it. Probably in the whole movie, the most complicated scene was the pod race, and John Knoll was involved, who did that. That was his group that did it. And I came on and just and they showed me, what do you want to do on this? And I said, well, I think these 2 sequences would be neat to do, and one of them is this big Gungan battle where all these characters, Jar Jar type, from Jar Jar's relatives, a few thousand of them are fighting a few thousand droids. And it was just a matter of scale and an awful lot of work to get that stuff in not that much time. We had like 2,000 shots we had to do in probably a year and a half, and we'd done nothing like that, even close to it, before. And it had to get out. George really believed that what he had done was he had waited till the technology was there to bring this new vision he had for the prequels that was much bigger than what he had done for the original ones. And he just always saw those original, he was always, all the time during the original Star Wars films, he would sort of say, well, that's about 50% of what I wanted, you know? And we didn't know what he meant by that. And maybe he actually meant 5% of what he wanted when you look at the prequels. But he had a chance to do it, and so he just made the vast vistas and more spaceships in the shots and more Gungans fighting, more droids, stuff like that. And those films are really kind of his version of The Godfather as far as the narrative going on, very mysterious going on, but with these massive worlds that are more like probably the comic books he read when he was a kid, you know, really bigger and more expansive, you know. And we had to grow ILM. We had I think our model shop alone to make models was like 200 people. And we had other shows going on at the same time. So I think we were at 1,200 employees for that period for each of the prequels. I came into Close Encounters only for the last 5 months, and they'd been working on it, because I was working on Star Wars. I had like 4 days off between, but I always wanted to meet Steven, so I said, I got to get on this show. And got onto it and ended up shooting the mothership, which was crazy. I had no idea what I was going to be doing, and that ends up being the big end of the movie. But so it already had been worked out, and Doug Trumbull was the effects supervisor on that. So I just came in really as kind of a babysitter with this big model and all this motion control equipment, with the idea of getting the shots done. And we had, I don't remember how many shots, must have been 25, and had like 6 months to do them. But Steven was great. You know, all the designs had already been done, the models had been made. I think he based the mothership design off of the Long Beach Freeway in Los Angeles. There's a big factory off to the north side of the freeway, and he was going by there one time at nighttime, and all you see are these big spires and lights, sodium-colored lights going, and it was just the weirdest, darkest thing. And it's always hazy down there from all the pollution, and that's kind of where he got the idea of this big city that you could barely see. And we had, shooting some of the stuff, the exposures might be like, I remember there was something where the exposure was an hour or 2 for 1 frame of film. So these things would take sometimes a day or 2, and it's all being done by computers. It's all we're doing, and we've programmed. We're just sitting there making sure nothing goes wrong. And it was shot in smoke, and we had to fill the room with smoke and make sure that the smoke was consistent It was all done by monitoring it sort of by hand with a little photo cell and a little light across the room and making sure that if it got a little bit clearer, we pump a little bit more smoke into it. It was drudgery. And breathing this horrible smoke. We were in a little safe room off to the side, but it was still pretty bad still. And then that film came out and was, really a big successful movie also, and both in the same year, and both by two, top directors. Mm. So that was a great time. But that was a really fun film. It was a very low-budget movie. It was so low budget that we couldn't do the effects in our normal way, which was shooting on this big VistaVision film, so that when we composited it, the grain structure, the image is still sharp when you start putting a lot of pieces together. And all the other films we'd done at that time, we'd shot in this big VistaVision film, which is more expensive to do, and E.T. didn't have the money, so we ended up doing it in regular 35 millimeter like the rest of the movie, with some tricks and everything, and still got the stuff to look great. And I tried afterwards to get the other ILM folks to change to 35 millimeter because it's so much easier to use because they use the same equipment and the same crew and everything, but nobody would do it. So we just kept using VistaVision, and as well as the rest of Hollywood, all the way for the next, whatever that was, 10 years or so that was left. The bicycle part. So the bike and the kid are a stop motion model with a process called Go Motion. The reason being, I didn't want to hang a kid from wires or anybody, and I didn't think we could ever get it to quite look right, or lit right, or get the bicycle maneuver to look right. Anytime you're dealing with full-size things and stunts like that, things can just show up and look and never be solved. But with stop motion, we could really control it. And the background of that is a real photograph of a real moon in the pine tree in the foreground, shot in Muren County with a super long, 1,000 millimeter lens, something like that, or 800 millimeter lens, so I wanted something real in the shot. And there was no point in trying to duplicate the moon because it looked so great. So I think we did 2 or 3 takes of different moons one night, and one of them was just terrific, and so that's what's in the film. And then blue screened the kid in front of it. And Stephen, I think, got that idea from Peter Pan. I think it's in that also, of the boat flying in front of the moon, and he ended up using it for his logo for Amblin and all. So he gets a lot of his ideas from what he saw as a kid. Stephen does. I think his memory bank is massive compared to most people's. And I think he just recalls so many things, not only about effects, but about acting and emotions of actors within scenes, and so that when he was working on a project, he has this huge library and knows how to reconstruct it in a way that seems like it's brand new, And a lot of it, by now it probably is, but at the beginning it really was sort of like, I take this take something from The Searchers and put it over here and mix it with, Grapes of Wrath and do this part over here, and you'll end up with E.T. Who would have ever thought, Those examples aren't necessarily right, but they might be. There was a circle set made in London with a car on it that the actors could be in, two sets of them, and it was probably 200 feet long, went around a circle. So they could get all the close-ups, and they could get some medium shots maybe of it, and the camera could go along, and it was in the middle was where the camera would go and could move along. But the wider shots, and even some close shots of the cars, and over the lava and all that sort of stuff, coming out of a tunnel where you can really see it.
Donc on avait les vrais acteurs sur un vrai décor. Ça, c'était le vrai décor. C'est là où justement les voix montaient sans.
All you ever saw really was a wall behind him. If you ever had to look front or back, it couldn't be. Those were a blue screen. The actors were in front of a blue screen because the set didn't go on very long. So we did the actors for blue screen for some shots, for front and back shots, side views and close-ups of the actors shot sideways. They had this real set, and that helped because the actors were really shaking around in this thing where they were moving. If they'd also done those blue screen, I think it would have hurt the performances. So, and then but for all the other shots, any time it's sort of wide, those were models, and very small models, and done stop motion also. And the trick on that was the distance. In order to go with the distance that we needed to have a shot get really exciting, it couldn't be too quick a shot. It had to run like, some of them are like 6 and 8 seconds long, was to, by the time I figured out how big the camera was, the smallest camera we could shoot with, it was going to have to be 150 feet or 100 feet long, which was too big. We didn't have the room for it. It was way too expensive. And so and that was going to mean that the camera could not get that long a shot. It might run 3 seconds is all we could get, or 5 seconds on a shot, which didn't seem like it was long enough. But I came up with the idea of using a Nikon still camera as a movie camera, because it could shoot stop motion. And it's only like, this wide, 4 inches wide. And anyone would have worked, but we had a lot of Nikons around there at the time. And we put a little back on it, took the back part that opens up, kind of took some of the insides out and added a couple of little registration things that could advance the film. I put a motor on it, and it could take like 30 feet of film in this little back magazine that was made for another small little military camera. And we put them together. It's not as simple as it sounds, but it worked. And you just need a mill and a machine and some optimism, that you can do it. And that meant that everything was smaller. And once it was smaller, it was cheaper, and we could get nice long shots in the space we had, and you can't tell the difference. And it meant also that the most of the cave walls are tinfoil that were just spray painted, and balsa wood for the sets. And if the sets had all had to have been bigger, they would have had to have been made out of real wood and maybe real plaster, and everything just would have gotten harder. So he kept it really, really tiny. And with all the speed that you're going, you don't see it. You don't see any flaws. And it was actually easy if we set a shot up and something looked funny about the tinfoil that didn't look like a rock, you could just go up to it and kind of put your thumb here and scrunch it like that until it looked like a real rock formation, that had been cut out of the walls. So that came out really well. Well, if you look at my career, I'm very unsatisfied with almost everything I've done, and intentionally, and I know there's some good stuff, but intentionally at the end of a project, I say that's obsolete. So I'm always looking for what's next, and what had been promised was computer graphics. This was going to be able to do everything, and we had a computer graphics group that ended up being Pixar, a lot of the Pixar guys. But they were hired by George and working there for probably 4 or 5 years or so, and not much was coming out. They were writing software, and they were building a input scanner app, and this was going on and on. And we'd go in, and they'd show us, oh, it's going to be great, and we'd see all the lights and all this stuff and the little tests, and it'll be in a few more months we'll have something, and another 3 years will go by. And it was all real problems. I mean, the equipment was very slow, and it was real, but I'm impatient. And they really wanted to, before they delivered anything, they wanted it finished and working. But there's a danger there in that it's like never finished. They're always coming up with new ideas. But I managed to, when this show came in, there were 3 different effect sequences. I said, I'm going to do my own sort of bake-off between 3. I'm going to do a little rod puppet thing with little, sort of like we'd done Rancor, with little pastries coming to life. There's another sequence we're going to do with Go Motion, these flying harpy characters, and I can try this computer graphic group on this other sequence. It's a hallucination. So this, when you saw it, the priest is having a hallucination. So it didn't have to look perfect. And all that we knew, Barry Levinson directed it, we just knew that out of the glass, he hallucinates, something comes, a stained glass character, and kills him. And so we designed a sequence of these 6 or 8 shots or whatever it is. And the computer graphic guys didn't want to do it, but there was some arm twisting, they ended up doing it. And I needed to come up and wanted to come up with a design that if somebody like you was going to look at it, it couldn't be done stop motion, it couldn't be done, with a man in a suit, it couldn't be done any other way. And my wife came up with the idea of having it be like a mobile all these separate pieces, like a stained glasses, but without the lead between them. So there's 100 and whatever separate pieces. There's no way to ever do that in those days with an effect. But it's perfect for computer graphics. And so we did it, and it just really worked out. And it took 6 months to do the 7 or 8 shots, whatever it is. It was a slow process. John Lasseter did the animation. Bill Reeves and those same guys that are with Pixar and have been for all these years did all the work. Those guys were great. They really wanted to work on it, and they really got behind it and did some terrific work on it. The idea came from a research paper that had been done for SIGGRAPH a few years before. And George was producing it, George Lucas was producing it, and Ron Howard directed. And they wanted something that was shocking for the transformation. And all there was been done up until that time was the sort of stuff that Rick Baker did, where you build a creature that can go from this pose to that pose, then you cut away, and you build another creature that can do that into that, you cut away. And I wanted to do something where you could put the camera on there and not cut away. So you just would, there's no trick going on. So we did this by building probably about 7 different weird creatures that were essentially at the start of each shot and at the end of each shot. And they were really weird. There was this one that was like the tiger starts out with just this sort of foam rubber ball for a head and these 2 big things that are like legs there. And we kind of pushed it up as far until it looked awful. And then we had a real tiger we got in there also. And with morphing, we could sort of blend these different images together, and they were moving. They weren't stills like the SIGGRAPH paper had been done. It just seemed like we could get this to work with a movie at 24 frames a second. So they were, the motion, the edges were all spline manipulated like with computers, and they were traced by Doug Smythe, who wrote the software for it also at the time. And it was just really super neat to see it, and got a lot of people seeing it. And then the Michael Jackson thing was done, a number of other things were done after that too. And it was way overdone, and it had its time, and it's passed, and that was it. So, but it was neat at the time because nobody had seen anything like it. And we also had to work on blending the colors. That had never been done before. There's a lot of stuff in there that needed to be, that when you look at it as a professional filmmaker, it's not just the outline that's changing, of course, but the colors have got to change too, and they can't just change in these big areas that are going to look fake. They have to change much more like your imagination might imagine something to actually change from one color to another. And some of the movements, they're not quite right. We did run out of time like we always did. Yeah, he also, I think, talked about doing it with maybe stop motion, a big stop motion clay figure and projecting water patterns and ripples and everything on it. But Jim knew that wasn't going to work, and he was just desperate. But Jim didn't, well, he'd always worked with his friends in small companies, and ILM was pretty much always a big company. He didn't want to really work with us, but Phil said, you got to talk to Dennis. He's working on stuff there, and he may have an idea. And okay, I'll talk to him. And he called up, and he was coming the next day and told us a little bit about it. And Jay Riddle, who worked for us at the time, spent most of the night doing just a really quick test in plastic with CG, but with a plastic shape of the pseudopod or water weenie, whatever you want to call it. And Jim, when he came, just was knocked out that we were enthusiastic. And a small enough company that we did it. We stayed late and worked and got this thing done. And that was kind of it. And that's the way, the reason it worked. It was not a reach beyond stuff that had been done. I'd been keeping my eye, from way back on CG, and you could sort of see examples of changing contours and stuff like that and things. And this was a matter of sort of being able to make a cylinder with some sort of patterns on it that were recognizable as water, and then being able to take photographs of what the environment was, which we shot just a still camera, and map those onto it so you have reflections, and then the transmission view through it was a still frame of the background. So it was not a huge leap. It was to the audience, and we were thrilled with it. But nobody had seen anything like it, and it really got everybody excited about what you could do with this. And so that Jim took seriously the idea Terminator 2 and doing the character in that. Jim felt he could cut the pseudopod out if it didn't work, but you can't cut the T-1000 out of Terminator 2. And there's some tricks I did. I always coming from a background of effects and real effects, I'm always looking at models and nature and all the time, which I recommend to everybody. Jim had always said this water's got to be clear. This is seawater. They're 8,000 feet under the water or something like that. And I knew that's not really what you wanted, because if it's clear, first of all, nothing in real life is clear. Nothing of that size is going to be clear. That's going to be the first clue of computer graphics, if it's not anything you can recognize. So I just put a little bit of white in it, just a little exposure is all it is, so that you got a sense of a volume there, a thickness, a weight to it, and it completely changed. And I never told Jim I did this either. And I did the same thing on T2. He said, oh, the chrome's got to be 100% chrome. It's got to reflect perfect and it shows everything. Well, there's a lot of movies that come out with chrome, have come out since T2 with chrome figures, and they look totally CG. And one of the things they're not doing is adding a little bit of imperfections that you might get if that material actually existed. So that had the same thing. All the blacks never were black, and the whites were not quite white compared to the scene around it. So it gives it weight and everything. And that's all that sort of trickery is important for that last little 5% that can make all the difference in an effect's working or not. Just to back up quickly, George had gotten rid of the graphics group actually before The Abyss, and it took us 2 years to get it together. So we could do The Abyss because we had 2 years of prep to get into making motion picture effects that look real. So we just got better then with Jurassic, or with T2, and then got up to Jurassic. And my buddy Phil Tippett got the job to do the job in stop motion. And we were just going to add, which is puppets again and everything, we were going to add some kind of blurs to it to make it look a little more realistic. But we wanted to, we had this computer graphic group and they were doing great stuff, but nowhere that I looked could I see anything that looked like people had done testing or anything on skin that didn't look plastic. And it just, because computer graphics in those days looked like computer graphics, but you can cheat it with translucent water, you can cheat it with a chrome ball, and you saw us test like that, but you never saw anything that looked like with skin. So we did some testing and guys just came with a great thing. We managed to get the next step, which is to make what appears to be a solid animal outdoors in bright sunlight or in rain and everything, and it's doing all the good stuff about computer graphics. It's moving smoothly. It doesn't have the side effects or things that you get with models. We could put the detail into the skins and everything like that, and move the camera around that you couldn't do with stop motion. So the whole show switched over to being done CG, and Phil came on the show and still did CG work or did animation on it. But it just worked out really good, so we're really happy about it. Plan B was Phil Tippett. I mean, that was Steven's plan A. So that's there. We're ready to go with it, and we could fix it up so it wouldn't be quite as jerky. But you take these steps, and you've got to be optimistic about it. You can't be foolish. You can't jump into something that you really haven't solved everything. You need to solve at the beginning, And we just ended up with Jurassic turning out a finished shot in color, in enough resolution on film. You can project it on a big screen, bright daylight, and it's of the Tyrannosaurus just walking right by the camera. And I took it down and showed it to him and some other folks, and I believed it, and they believed it, and that was it. But if we hadn't gone that far, we might have found some god-awful, horrible thing, and it just, had to jump back onto using Phil stuff, and that would have been costly and unfortunate too.
Steven Spielberg, George Lucas et James Cameron, comment vous pourriez les définir, tous ces trois-là?
Well, they're all visionaries, and those are I think, the great people to work for. I really like working with people that know what they want, and that you can collaborate with. They're open to ideas. They see visions. They can, not fantasy visions that I know of, maybe, but they're just really great people to work with. in your an imagination, you know, and that's important because you're making movies, you know, that have been done like this before. Jim Cameron is a very tough person to work for, unless you know what you're doing. Then he's a sweetheart. But if you try to bluff him about something, you know, and say, well, you know, Jim told you 3 times to do something, you didn't do it, you know, goodbye. You know, you have 3 chances, and but what you get are the best people working with him, because there's no bullshit, you know, there's no playing around. You're the best in the team, and I really loved that. Working on T2 was amazing. You know, the top people, and The Abyss was amazing too, doing it. So anyway, he's great. He knows what he wants. He gave us real specific storyboards for every shot. And I did a lot of behind the scenes stuff and took him and showed him all the time how these shots were being done, because he had no idea, really. And I showed him, you know, how we did the early versions of it, wireframes, and then, you know, the motion different, you know, how it would look, what the compositing was like, what the rendering was like. So he learned, especially on T2, what we're doing. Steven is, you know, more of it, makes total films, you know, much more not the action films, but all types of films. But he also knows what he wants and how it's going to fit in the movie, how long it kind of needs to be, but he has a great vision of not so much the technology. His movies are not aimed like Jim's are, with blue lights here and dark and mysterious. He's got more of an optimistic look. So in doing E.T., for example, I made sure the sunsets looked perfect, like a beautiful day out there, or even nighttime scenes would be these spectacular, or not spectacular so much, but just wonderful, perfect view of something that's like, it's just like, you know, the best cameraman in the world could have shot, because that richness is what he likes, and the poetry. And George is the storyteller who is very open to collaboration and has these big, massive vistas that he wants to paint, you know, and on movie film. So they're just, you know, they're all different people, but they do share, you know, they share this ability to be able to see things that most people can't see, and to want to tell stories and have access to the money to make the movies, which is very important too.
DJ Abraham, il est comment?
He's very much like Steven. I think he actually Steven mentored him a little bit. I think I may have met him on Lost World. He was visiting the set one day 20 years ago. And I vaguely remember this kid kind of sitting in the chair watching when I was directing or helping Steven and I'll do the scene. And I think JJ said it was him that day visiting. But he's a big fan of old films. He loves the characters of it. He was perfect to do the new Star Wars film. And just like he was on the Star Trek films. And he's exactly what you think. You know, nice guy, loves the people, loves the history of the movie. Is a story person, and is very respectful of the past, and made sure that this movie was shot, like, you know, on film with old lenses and everything like that, so it would fit into the trilogy, or to the new trilogy, you know, the next 3 films.
Mesdames et messieurs, Monsieur Denis Muren.